32 nuns vanished overnight, and when the sea gave something back, it wasn't human. This is the story the church buried. Before we begin, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and let's uncover what really happened at Our Lady of Sorrows. The convent stood like a scar upon the hill, its black spire piercing the grey Atlantic sky. The villagers of Dunsmuir had long stopped looking toward it. Even the fishermen who once glanced for its candlelit windows during storm nights now turned their eyes away. It was said that the bell at Our Lady of Sorrows had not tolled in 7 years, not for vespers, not for death, not for joy. Yet, in the late autumn of 1952, a whisper began to curl through the streets below like a cold fog. Something had gone terribly wrong upon that hill. Father Declan Mallory first heard it from the butcher's wife, who swore she'd seen a wagon leaving the convent under cover of moonlight, shrouded in tarpaulin, its driver weeping. Then the postmaster spoke of an unsigned letter, marked only by a wax seal depicting the Sacred Heart, the symbol of Our Lady of Sorrows, but smeared as if by trembling hands. The letter bore 9 words that unsettled even the most faithful man. They are with child, and none can explain it. The convent, founded in 1823, was known for its silence. 32 sisters lived within its cloistered walls, under the rule of Mother Superior Agnes Mary. They tended to the poor, cared for orphans, and rarely ventured beyond the gates. It was a place of whispered prayers and candle smoke, where even the bees seemed to hum in minor keys. But in that bleak November, silence turned to secrecy, and secrecy to dread. When Father Mallory received the bishop's summons to the diocesan residence in Galway, he suspected little. Yet as he entered the stone parlour and saw the bishop's pale face, he understood that the matter was unlike any confession or parish scandal. Bishop Cullen sat by the fire, wringing his hands. "Declan," he said softly, "you are to go to the convent of Our Lady of Sorrows at once. There have been irregularities, matters of faith and nature." The words hung in the air. "Is it theft? Heresy?" Mallory asked, half hoping. The bishop looked toward the window, as if to avoid the weight of what must be said. "The sisters," he murmured, "every one of them, or nearly so, is with child." Mallory's mind stilled. He could not have heard correctly. "The sisters," he repeated. "Yes, 32. The road to the convent was long and treacherous, carved through cliffs and windswept moors. As Mallory's horse-drawn trap climbed higher, he caught glimpses of the sea, black and restless below. Clouds rolled like bruises over the horizon, and rain fell in thin, cutting lines. When at last he reached the wrought-iron gates, he found them unguarded. No bell rope hung to announce visitors. The rusted chain had snapped long ago. The courtyard was overgrown. The crucifix above the main door leaned at an odd angle, as though the weight of Christ had become too much even for stone. He was met not by a sister, but by an old groundskeeper, a mute man known only as Hob. His eyes darted, nervous and apologetic, as he gestured toward the great wooden doors. When they creaked open, Mallory felt a gust of air colder than the rain outside. Inside, stillness. Candles guttered in tall iron sconces, their wax weeping down like slow tears. The scent of incense and damp mingled with something else, something faintly sweet, faintly wrong. Mother Superior Agnes Mary awaited him in the refectory. She was a tall woman, her habit immaculate, her eyes ringed with sleeplessness. "You have come quickly, Father," she said. Her voice was calm, too calm. "I came as soon as I was summoned," Mallory replied. "Tell me what has occurred." Agnes Mary hesitated, then crossed herself. "Every sister in our care, save 2 who are elderly, has shown signs of conception." Mallory tried to steady his breath. "You have consulted a physician?" "A doctor from Galway came 3 weeks past. He has not returned since." Why not? Her gaze flicked toward the windows, as though something unseen might be listening. Because he refused to speak of what he found. The convent's corridors whispered with echoes. Mallory followed the Mother Superior through them, passing rows of closed doors. Behind some came faint voices, murmured prayers, or perhaps sobs. The air grew heavy with the scent of oil lamps and something faintly metallic. When they reached the infirmary, he saw them. The sisters, pale and trembling in their beds, hands clutching rosaries, their eyes wide as if waiting for judgment. None spoke. Some bore faint bruises upon their wrists, as though from seizures or restraints. One young nun, Sister Helena, turned her face toward him as he entered. "It is not of this world," she whispered. "None of it." Mallory knelt beside her. "What happened, my child?" But she only pressed a finger to her lips. "He listens," she said. "Who listens?" Her eyes shifted toward the chapel, where a faint bell, though long broken, seemed to echo in the wind. That night, Mallory was given a small chamber near the sacristy. He tried to pray, but his words fell hollow. Somewhere beyond his door, footsteps paced, slow, deliberate, as though measuring the stones. At one point, he thought he heard weeping, soft and childlike, though there were no children within the convent walls. When dawn came, he found a single object placed outside his door, a rosary of black glass beads, and a note written in trembling script. "Father, do not trust the Mother Superior. The miracle is not holy." Outside, the sea screamed against the cliffs. The morning light found the convent grey and cold as ever. In the courtyard, crows circled the chapel spire. Mallory went to morning mass, only to find that the chalice upon the altar was empty, though it had been full the night before. And in the second pew from the front, 32 veiled figures knelt, their hands clasped over their hearts, their lips moving in silent prayer. All around them, the candles flickered wildly, though there was no wind. The following morning brought no warmth, only a thick, pewter fog that clung to the convent walls like sorrow itself. The bell tower loomed above, mute and accusing. Father Mallory rose early, drawn by the uneasy sense that something watched from the cloister walk. When he stepped outside his chamber, he found the Mother Superior already waiting in the corridor, her pale hands folded. "You will lead Mass today," she said. "We are unwell." Unwell. The word struck him oddly. Her voice carried no trace of illness, only exhaustion and fear. Mallory nodded. "Very well. Afterward, I must speak to the sisters. I need to know what has happened here." "They will tell you nothing," Agnes Mary murmured. "They believe it a punishment." "For what sin?" Her eyes lingered on the crucifix above them, where the carved figure of Christ seemed to twist in the candlelight. "For being chosen." At Mass, the silence was suffocating. The sisters knelt in 2 perfect rows, their heads bowed. Yet as Mallory began the homily, a sound rose, a soft hum, low and harmonic, like the tone of glass rubbed by a wet finger. It came not from the organ, nor from any voice he could name. The air shimmered. For a moment, he swore the very stones of the chapel vibrated. Then it stopped. Afterward, Sister Helena approached him again, her eyes wild. "Father," she whispered, "last night I dreamt of the sea. It was inside the walls, rising black and full of faces." "Dreams are not omens," Mallory said. She shook her head. "Then why do we all dream the same?" That afternoon he searched the archives, dust thick on every volume. He found an old ledger dating back to 1823, the convent's founding year. Its first entry was brief. "Our Lady of Sorrows is built upon ground once consecrated to the drowned saint. The sea remembers." Mallory frowned. No such saint existed. He turned the page, only to find the next 50 torn clean away. When he emerged from the records room, the corridor was empty, save for a small shape lying in the dust, a white veil torn at the edge. He picked it up, and from the chapel came a single, impossible sound, the bell tolling, though its rope had been cut. When Father Mallory reached the chapel, the bell had already fallen silent. Only the faint scent of salt lingered in the air, a briny tang that did not belong so far from the shore. The sisters were gathered inside, kneeling before the altar. None spoke. Their veils were immaculate, yet their hands trembled, clutching their rosaries as though to anchor themselves to the earth. Who rang the bell? Mallory demanded. No one answered. Mother Agnes stood apart, her gaze fixed upon the crucifix above the altar. "No one touched it," she said at last. "The rope has been gone for years." He climbed the narrow stair to the belfry. The air grew colder as he ascended, stones slick with mist. When he reached the top, he found the great bell swaying gently, though no wind stirred. Around its rim, strange symbols had been carved into the oxidized bronze, not by recent hands, but ancient ones. Spirals, circles, and what might have been waves. And at the bell's base, in a shallow bowl of water that had gathered from the fog, something glimmered, a single black pearl. That evening, the fog thickened. The convent seemed to shrink beneath it, its towers dissolving into grey. Mallory sat in the refectory with Agnes Mary, who stirred her tea without drinking it. "You know of the drowned saint," he said quietly. She hesitated. It was an old superstition, from the fishermen who built this place. They believed that beneath the sea lived a martyr whose body never decayed, who whispered blessings to those who prayed by the shore, and curses to those who turned away. Her eyes lifted. "You've read the same stories I have." Mallory leaned forward. "Do you believe these pregnancies are divine?" She set the spoon down. "No, Father. I believe they are a warning." Later that night, a cry shattered the stillness. Mallory ran to the dormitory, heart pounding. There he found Sister Helena kneeling by her bed, clutching her abdomen, eyes wide with terror. "They move," she gasped. "Not like children, like tides." Before he could reply, every lamp in the corridor went out. The darkness pulsed once, as though the very air breathed, and from somewhere below, perhaps the crypt, perhaps the sea, came a deep, resonant sound, low and mournful, like the bell tolling under water. The sisters began to pray, their voices rising in a single trembling chant. Mallory turned toward the sound, and realized with horror that it came from beneath the chapel floor. The cry beneath the chapel persisted long into the night, a low, tidal resonance that made the glass of the candle holders tremble. Father Mallory stood before the altar, the flickering light painting deep lines across his face. Each vibration seemed to thrum through his ribs, through the bones of the building itself. At dawn, he gathered a lantern and descended into the crypt. The air grew damp and close, thick with the odor of mildew and something faintly metallic. The narrow stair coiled downward into shadow. The crypt was small, lined with ancient tombs bearing the names of long-dead abbesses. Moss crept between the stone slabs. Yet one sarcophagus stood open, its lid pushed aside, its interior half filled with brackish water. Within lay no bones, only a length of rosary beads and a scrap of fabric embroidered with the symbol of the Sacred Heart, but warped, the heart replaced by a coiling spiral. Mallory crouched closer. The water rippled though he had not touched it. He leaned in, lantern trembling, and saw his own reflection blur, and then vanish altogether, replaced by a darkness that seemed to move with intent. He stumbled back, breath caught in his throat. The sound he had heard above, that deep, mournful tolling, rose again, emanating from the open tomb. The lamp sputtered. For a moment he thought he saw a pale shape within the water, something vaguely human, its eyes closed as if in sleep. Then the light died, plunging the crypt into blackness. When he returned to the surface, the convent was stirring. The sisters moved silently through the cloisters, heads bowed, lips pressed tight in unspoken dread. Mother Agnes waited in the refectory, her habit damp from the morning fog. She did not rise when he entered. "You went below," she said simply. "Yes. And you found the grave." "It was open," Mallory said. "There was no body." Agnes closed her eyes. "Then it has begun again." He stared. "What has begun?" She reached into her sleeve and drew out a fragment of parchment, yellowed and torn. "I found this in the library years ago. I hoped it was superstition." The text was faded, but Mallory could still make out the words. "When the sea calls back her brides, the convent shall quicken, and the waters shall rise beneath the altar. Guard the bell, for it is the only voice the earth will hear." Mallory looked up, his voice rough. "Her brides." Agnes nodded. In the old tales, the drowned saint was not one man, but many souls joined in the deep. The sea takes what the land cannot keep. When the bell tolls without hands, it is their summons. That evening, the rain came. Sheets of it battered the windows, howling through the eaves. The sisters gathered in the chapel, praying aloud to drown out the storm. Mallory stood beside them, but his eyes kept drifting to the floor, to the faint moisture seeping upward through the cracks in the stone. A trickle at first, then a steady pulse. Salt water. He knelt, touching it with his fingers. It was warm. The prayers faltered. Every candle guttered. The wind ceased. Then, from below, a sound unlike any bell, a long, slow breath, rising from the depths. The water between the stones rippled outward in concentric circles, and beneath the silence, Father Mallory heard a whisper, many voices speaking as one. "We return." The following morning dawned unnaturally still. The storm had vanished, leaving behind a bruised sky and a sea as smooth as glass. Yet the air inside the convent pulsed with something unseen, a rhythm that moved beneath ordinary sound, steady as a heartbeat. Father Mallory barely slept. His dreams had been filled with water and faces that hovered just beneath its surface, mouths moving without sound. When he awoke, his bedsheets were damp, though the ceiling above was dry. He went to find Mother Agnes, but discovered her kneeling before the chapel doors, her eyes fixed on the seam between them. "Do you hear it?" she whispered. "Hear what?" "The singing." Mallory strained to listen. Faintly, beneath the stone, beyond the sea wind, came a melody, slow and sorrowful. A women's chorus, many voices weaving together in a dirge that seemed both holy and impossibly ancient. "The sisters," he said. "They're praying." Agnes shook her head. "No one has entered the chapel since Matins. That sound is not ours." By midday, the sisters' conditions worsened. Some grew feverish, their skin cold to the touch. Others wandered the halls in a daze, murmuring phrases from Scripture mixed with words no one recognized. Sister Helena lay pale and trembling in the infirmary, her pulse erratic. "They call to me," she said when Mallory approached. "From below. They say I am promised." "Promised to whom?" Her gaze turned toward the window, where the horizon glimmered faintly. "To the deep." He placed a hand on her forehead, burning. He reached for his breviary, intending to pray over her, but when he opened it, every page was damp. Ink bled down the margins like veins. Later, desperate for answers, Mallory returned to the crypt with 2 candles and a rope. The air was colder now. The water in the open tomb had risen nearly to the lip. This time he saw what floated within it, fragments of cloth, rosary beads, and something pale that might once have been a hand, or perhaps only a trick of light. He whispered a blessing, his voice echoing off the stone. "Lord, preserve us from the deceiver." The water quivered. Then, slowly, letters began to form upon its surface, rippling words that vanished almost as soon as they appeared. Agnes knew. Mallory stumbled backward. The candle fell, hissing out in the damp. He found her waiting in the chapel when he returned, her expression unreadable. "How long?" he demanded. She did not feign ignorance. "Since the last generation of sisters," she said. "The first signs came 40 years ago, but we silenced them, buried the evidence, sealed the crypt. And now it happens again." She nodded. "Because we never broke the vow." Mallory frowned. "What vow?" "To keep the sea from reclaiming what belongs to it." Outside, thunder rolled though no clouds moved in the sky. The sea had begun to stir once more, and somewhere in its depths, or perhaps beneath the chapel itself, something vast was waking. That night, as Mallory walked the cloisters, he saw the sisters standing in the courtyard, motionless, their faces tilted toward the sea. Every one of them hummed the same wordless tune, the one he had heard beneath the earth. Their veils fluttered though the wind was still, and as he watched, the bell began to move again, ringing not with clamour but with slow, deliberate grace. Each toll matched the rhythm of the tide below, and somewhere in his soul, Father Mallory understood. The convent was no longer waiting for salvation. It was preparing for birth. By the third dawn, mist had swallowed the hill entirely. The villagers below no longer saw the convent spire, only the faint glow of candles moving behind the fog like drifting souls. No one dared climb the road any more. Even the postmaster, who once brought weekly letters from the diocese, left his parcel at the crossroads and fled. Inside, the air had changed. The smell of salt and decay thickened. The walls themselves wept moisture. Father Mallory found mould blooming in the shape of spirals along the chapel pews, the same sigils he had seen carved into the bell. Mother Agnes refused to speak of it. She spent her hours in the chapel, praying before the altar, her lips forming silent words. The sisters no longer obeyed her. They wandered the corridors at night, whispering, humming that same mournful hymn. It was not madness. It was unity. On the 6th night, Mallory awoke to the sound of footsteps outside his chamber. Bare, wet feet slapping stone. He opened the door. A sister stood there, her habit soaked to the knees, her eyes pale as milk. "Sister," he began. "They are waiting," she said softly. "Who?" "The mothers." She turned and walked away down the hall, leaving faint puddles in her wake. He followed, his candle trembling. The trail led not to the dormitory, but to the old garden behind the convent, a place long abandoned, where the ground had sunk unevenly and the well had been sealed with stone. The sister knelt beside it. "Listen," she whispered. Mallory leaned closer. Beneath the stone cover came a sound like rushing water, but layered, rhythmic, as if the ocean itself breathed. Then, faintly, words. "Open." He staggered back, heart hammering. "No," he muttered. "No." The sister smiled faintly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It is not evil, Father. It is coming home." Before he could stop her, she pressed her palms against the stone lid and began to chant in a language he did not know. The ground trembled. Cracks spread through the mortar like veins. Mallory seized her shoulders, pulling her away, but too late. The stone split, and a column of cold mist burst upward, scattering the candlelight. From the depths came a low, resonant moan, half wind, half voice. The sister collapsed, whispering through cracked lips. "The first door is open." When dawn came, the convent's bells, both broken and whole, began to toll on their own. The sound rolled across the cliffs, deep and unearthly. Mallory found Agnes in the chapel, kneeling, blood on her hands where the rosary had cut deep. "It has begun," she said quietly. "The sea is rising beneath us." He looked down. The flagstones were damp again, water pooling in the cracks. Through the reflection, he could see faces, pale, serene, countless, floating just below the surface. They were smiling. By the next night, the convent had become a place of perpetual twilight. Candles refused to burn for long. The wicks drowned themselves in wax, sputtering out as if smothered by unseen hands. The sisters spoke little now. Their chants had shifted from Latin psalms to strange, lilting verses that seemed to echo through the very stones. Father Mallory tried to summon the courage to leave, but each time he neared the gate, a thick fog rolled down the hill, blinding him. The iron lock was cold as bone and would not move, no matter how he struck it. It was as if the convent itself had sealed them inside. He found Agnes standing by the window in her chamber, gazing toward the sea that was no longer visible. "Do you feel it?" she asked without turning. "Yes," he said. "The tide." "No, the waiting. It's as if the air itself is holding its breath." That evening, as he prepared the chapel for Compline, he noticed the altar cloth was damp again. Beneath it, the marble glistened. He lifted a corner and froze. The floor beneath the altar had cracked. Water pulsed through the fissures, not pooling but breathing, expanding and contracting in a slow rhythm. From below came a faint, muffled harmony, as if an unseen choir sang through the rock. Agnes entered silently. "It is not water any more," she said. "What is it then?" "Memory." She knelt, dipping her fingertips into the seeping moisture. When she drew them back, a faint glow clung to her skin, like the light of the moon refracted through deep water. "Do you see?" Mallory shook his head. "You're not well. This is madness." "Madness," she whispered. "No, Father. Revelation. What we call sin may only be the sea remembering what it once owned." That night, the sisters gathered in the courtyard without command. They formed a perfect circle, faces tilted to the sky. Rain began to fall, not heavy but thick, the drops oddly luminous. Each drop that struck the ground hissed, leaving a pale shimmer where it landed. Mallory tried to speak, to call them inside, but the air pressed against his chest, crushing his voice. The sisters began to hum again, and the bell joined them, its tone low and mournful, keeping time with the rhythm of the waves below the cliffs. The earth trembled. From the chapel tower came a spray of water, salt water, bursting through the stones as though from lungs long submerged. The nuns did not flee. They lifted their hands to the sky, the rain washing over them, and Mallory saw their faces glowing faintly beneath their veils, serene and terrible. He fled into the refectory, gasping for air. The walls shuddered, plaster cracking like ice. The crucifix above the doorway tilted and fell, landing at his feet. The face of Christ had eroded away, only the shape of the cross remained. Outside, the chanting rose to a crescendo. Mallory peered through the window and saw the sisters standing knee-deep in water that had not been there a moment before, their eyes closed, their voices unified. The sea was no longer far below the hill. It had come to meet them, and above the storm of sound he heard a single voice, clear, human, unmistakable, rising from the chapel. It was Agnes, crying out, "The vow is broken. Let the tide claim its own." The bell rang once more, deep enough to rattle the foundations, and the floor beneath Father Mallory's feet began to crack open. The sound was deafening, a hollow thunder rolling through the convent's bones. The marble tiles split apart like ice under strain, and from the widening fissures poured water, dark and gleaming, carrying with it the faint scent of salt and iron. Father Mallory stumbled backward, his lantern toppling. The flame hissed out as the water spread across the refectory floor. Beneath its surface, shapes moved. Not fish, not shadows, but silhouettes of women, their faces calm, their hands folded as if in prayer. He crossed himself, whispering, "In nomine Patris." But the words faltered. The water climbed higher, lapping at his knees, and from somewhere deep below came that now familiar voice. Many voices intertwined, speaking as one. "Do not fear us, Father. We are what was promised." He fled into the corridor, sloshing through the rising flood. The walls shimmered faintly, the paint blistering with moisture. Statues wept streams of water from their hollow eyes. He passed the chapel and saw the sisters still gathered there, floating rather than standing now, their veils drifting around them like seaweed. In the centre, Mother Agnes stood waist-deep, her arms outstretched toward the altar. Her face was serene, illuminated by a light that seemed to rise from beneath the water itself. "Agnes," he cried, "you must stop this. You're killing them." Her eyes opened, not blue now, but the color of the deep ocean. "No, Father," she said softly. "We're being delivered. The Church will." "The Church buried this long ago," she interrupted. "We are only uncovering what they feared to name." She lifted her hands, and the water surged upward, striking the ceiling in a spray of mist. "It is not the sea," she whispered. "It is the beginning." The walls groaned. The air itself felt heavy, almost liquid. Mallory tried to reach her, but the current pulled him down the corridor, sweeping him toward the courtyard. When he emerged, the fog was gone, replaced by a vast, unnatural stillness. The courtyard had become a pool. The old well, once sealed, now gaped open, water spilling upward in slow spirals rather than falling down. The sisters circled it, their voices soft and harmonic, their bellies aglow with faint light. He wanted to shout, to drag them away, but his voice caught in his throat. The song they sang was not of this earth. Each note seemed to vibrate inside his skull, stirring memory and fear in equal measure. And then he saw it, rising from the well. A hand, pale, translucent, long-fingered. It gripped the rim of the stone, pulling upward. The air trembled as a second hand followed, then a face, calm, unblinking, crowned with strands of kelp. Its eyes were featureless, grey as deep water. The sisters did not recoil. They knelt. Mallory fell to his knees as well, not in worship, but in disbelief. The being spoke without sound. The water itself carried its voice. "You built this house upon our bones. You prayed above our tomb. Now we rise, not in wrath, but in remembrance." Agnes bowed her head. "Take us, then. Make us whole." Mallory shouted, "You don't know what you summon." But she turned to him, smiling faintly. "It was never summoning, Father. It was returning." The bell tolled once more, a sound so deep it seemed to shake the sky. Every window shattered. The sea answered, roaring from below the cliffs. The convent began to sink. Not crumble, not collapse. Sink, as though the earth beneath it had softened, pulling it slowly into the depths. Mallory grasped the nearest pillar, the water now up to his chest. The sisters sang louder, their voices rising to meet the bell. Light spilled from the well in a torrent of white and blue, filling the courtyard like dawn beneath the sea. For a moment, everything stilled. Then, silence. And the convent of Our Lady of Sorrows was gone. When the villagers climbed the hill at sunrise, they found only mist and a hollow depression in the earth, still wet with salt. The bell, half buried in mud, lay silent beside it. No bodies were ever recovered. But on calm nights, when the tide is low, the fishermen say they hear voices beneath the waves, women's voices, singing softly, keeping time with the roll of the sea. 3 days after the disappearance, the sea withdrew farther than any tide in living memory. The villagers gathered along the cliffs, staring at the vast plain of glistening sand where the waves should have been. Between ridges of kelp and shattered shells, they saw fragments of stone, carved arches, broken pillars, and a twisted iron gate half buried in the silt. It was unmistakable, the remains of the convent, risen from the deep. Father Declan Mallory was among the missing, presumed drowned. But at dawn on the 4th day, a fisherman named Aidan Callahan swore he saw a figure walking along the shallows, barefoot, drenched, his clerical collar torn. He spoke to no one, only stared out toward the horizon, where the water shimmered unnaturally calm. When the villagers called to him, he turned once, his eyes vacant, and whispered a single word before vanishing into the fog. "Listen." By noon the tide returned, but not as before. The water came quietly, not crashing, not roaring, but flowing upward, deliberate and steady, as if drawn by unseen hands. Within minutes, the ruins were gone again. That evening, the parish priest in Galway received a parcel, water-stained and sealed with wax. It contained a journal, its cover warped by salt. The first page bore a single name, Declan Mallory. Inside, the handwriting was frantic, uneven. The sea beneath Our Lady of Sorrows was never mere water. It remembers. The sisters were chosen not for purity, but for inheritance. The vow was not chastity, but guardianship, to keep the drowned from waking. But the vow was broken. The bell is their heart. It beats once for each life reclaimed. The final entry ended mid-sentence. They are not gone. They wait below the chapel floor, beneath the tide, beneath the bones of saints. The sound of the bell. The ink trailed off, the rest smeared into grey. That night, strange things began to happen along the coast. Wells filled with salt water. Windows trembled though no wind blew. At low tide, children playing near the beach found black glass rosaries washed ashore, beads strung together in endless loops. Some said they heard music under the waves. Others claimed to see veiled figures walking where the sand met the sea, their steps leaving no prints. The bishop ordered a full inquiry. Divers were sent to the site, but beneath the waves they found nothing. No foundation stones, no relics, not even silt disturbed where the convent once stood. It was as if the hill itself had been erased. One diver, a man named Kieran Holt, refused to return after his 3rd descent. His report, written tremblingly, described something vast moving in the depths. Not a creature, but a shape, its edges fluid, its surface luminous like the inside of a pearl. He ended with a single line. It was singing. Weeks passed. The story faded into rumour, the church sealing records, the villagers forbidden to speak of it. But at night, when storms gathered, the wind carried a sound no one could explain, the low tolling of a bell, rising and falling with the tide. And sometimes, when lightning flashed over the water, those who still dared to look swore they saw, far beneath the waves, the faint outline of a roof, a spire, and 32 dim lights moving gently in the dark. Not extinguished, only waiting. Years passed. The name Our Lady of Sorrows faded from maps, its hill reclaimed by grass and rain. Only fishermen and the oldest villagers remembered the fog that once gathered there, a fog that whispered and pulsed like a living thing. Yet some nights, when the sea was still and the moon hung low, faint lights could be seen moving beneath the water. Lanterns, some said. Souls, said others. The tide no longer followed its proper rhythm. It came and went in long, uneven breaths, as though the ocean itself were dreaming. In 1963, a coastal survey team arrived from Dublin to chart the bay for a new harbour. Among them was a marine geologist, Dr. Catherine Mallory, granddaughter of Father Declan Mallory. She knew nothing of the convent except fragments of family rumor, a priest who vanished, a church that drowned. Her instruments registered something peculiar, a deep, rhythmic vibration below the seabed, unlike any geological phenomenon. It pulsed every 32 seconds. She smiled at the coincidence, though unease prickled her spine. That evening, as her team camped along the cliffs, the sea lay black and silent. Dr. Mallory sat alone, listening. Somewhere below the surface, faint as breath, came the sound of a bell. She followed it. At dawn, the crew awoke to find her footprints leading down the slope and into the shallows. Her shoes were neatly placed on the sand. The water was calm. They found her recorder nearby, half buried in the surf. When they played it, only one thing emerged from the static, a low hum, almost harmonic, and a woman's voice whispering softly, "We are not lost. We have only changed our depth." In the years that followed, the tides along that coast altered permanently. Fishermen avoided the area. The church sold the remaining land and closed the parish. The hill grew wild again, overrun with blackthorn and ivy. Still, every generation, someone reported hearing it, a single toll of a bell on windless nights, carrying across the bay. Divers who dared to explore the depths told of ruins buried far below where any building should stand. Archways, mosaic floors, and statues of women half fused with coral, their faces turned upward, their hands clasped in prayer. And in the quiet between waves, some claimed to hear faint voices murmuring beneath the sea, not in terror, but in devotion. No one remembers the exact spot where the convent once stood. The maps have shifted, the coast reshaped by time. Yet the villagers of Dunsmuir still keep their windows shut during storms, and when the mist rolls inland, they light candles at their thresholds. For though Our Lady of Sorrows is gone, her hymn endures, a song without words, echoing in every tide that touches the shore. And somewhere, far beneath the surface, where the light fades and the world grows still, the sisters keep their vigil, unbroken and eternal, waiting, praying, listening for the bell that tolls only in the deep. The sea keeps its secrets, but stories like this never stay buried for long. If you felt the chill of Our Lady of Sorrows, subscribe to Eternal Obsidian and let the next mystery find you.